So I think it's undeniable that wireless has become an indispensable part of our communities and our everyday lives because it provides us with a multitude of different services. It helps us coordinate activities, answering the age-old question of where do you want to eat? I don't know, where do you want to eat? And then it allows us to kind of pick a meeting place once we've decided on that topic. It's enhanced safety and communications for us because whether you're talking about an Amber Alert or a Silver Alert and the ability to bring a lot of eyeballs to bear on trying to bring people home safely, or whether you're talking about the ability to rapidly transmit information about a developing crisis for people being able to use their mobile phones, or even something as simple, not simple, but as every day as the Waze application that can help route you in different directions to get you around things. It's also basically transcended boundaries and allow us to have unprecedented levels of sharing. So you can share an event that's going on. You can share a meal that you're having. You can share an opinion that you happen to have, informed or uninformed, and you can get it out there to the entire world. It becomes especially important when we start talking about people gathering because the ability to provide a unique or a reliable and robust end user experience kind of degrades as we start to get more and more people in the same place. So that's why we're kind of here, is because Houston brings the unique opportunity to bring a lot of people together in a lot of different ways. Houston's the 4th largest city in the U.S. This is not Chamber of Commerce thing. So this is Houston's the 4th largest city in the U.S. has a population of about 2.1 million people. In addition to the embedded base of 2.1 million, the 3 airports that serve the area, Hobby, George Bush, and Ellington, brought in about 55 million passengers in 2015. And as those people come in, they've got places that they've got to go and places that they want to see. In particular, that people like to go out to eat here. There are over 11,000 restaurants in Houston. And maybe they want to grab a bite because they're on their way to a play. Because the theater district in Houston is second only to New York City in the number of seats in a very small area. So there are 8 performing arts groups here in the city that have responsibility for over 12,000 seats. They might be on their way to a sporting event. They might be going to a college reunion. They might be going to something because there are over 40 colleges, universities, and other institutions that are inside the city. They might be going to professional sporting events because Houston's represented in the NFL by the Texans. They're represented in Major League Baseball by the Astros, by Major League Soccer by the Dynamo, and by the NBA by the Houston Rockets. Speaking of Rockets, who doesn't recognize these iconic phrases? Houston, we have a problem. And Houston, the Eagle, has landed. Those are all coming out of Johnson Space Center, which is the training base and a home for our nation's astronauts. Houston also bears the title of 2 world's largest events. One thing that they have as the world's largest is the world's largest medical center. Texas Medical Center employs 52,000 people and pumps $10 billion into the local economy. Besides the medical center, Houston is also home to the world's largest livestock and rodeo show, bringing in about 2.2 million visitors every year. Downtown, there are 23 Fortune 500 companies and over 5,000 energy-related firms. And that downtown space is occupied by skyscrapers, by a network of tunnels that go underneath the city. So as you look around, this is a great city for us to talk about how to deploy the disparate elements of the heterogeneous network. How do you use small cell? How do you use Wi-Fi? How do you use DAS? How do you use macro? How do all these things fit together? And so with that, what I'd like to do is kick it off and start talking to our panel. I'd like to start with Paula. Paula represents kind of our end user community. And so Paula, could you tell us more about the relationship between wireless and retail?
Absolutely. So as was mentioned earlier, Simon is a global real estate leader. We are the largest shopping center real estate investment trust in North America. We have close to 210 properties that we manage and or own with 185 million square feet of gross leasable area, with a stronghold of about over 10% of those properties residing in the state of Texas alone, with 3 of those in the general Houston market. Houston Galleria, the Galleria, which you're probably all familiar with, very close to this hotel right here. If you haven't visited it, would recommend you do so. It's a phenomenal property. We also have Houston Premium Outlets, which is a few minutes from here, as well as Katy Mills. And the challenge that we continually are faced with is how we make the shopping center a destination of choice for both our customers, our tenants, and overall in the industry continue to make Simon an overall leader. And the thing that we've been challenged with, obviously, over the years with the increase in technology that customers carry around on a regular basis is how do we make sure they're fully connected when they visit our properties and don't feel as though they're disconnected from their families and make it the destination of choice. And so the combination of both 4G, LTE, cellular, and Wi-Fi is a very important amenity to us for our customers. But in addition to it being an important amenity to our customers, we're also in a situation where it's also become a business delivery vehicle for us. It's very cost prohibitive and not very logical to have units that you install on property like ATMs and vintage stroller units and Coke machines that now accept credit cards for transactions to have those hardwired. And so for several years now, those types of uses on the property have been connected via a cellular signal. And so we continually see additional uses for whether it's cellular or Wi-Fi. You know, we have both predominantly in a lot of our centers. We have over 100 properties out of our 210, 215 properties that have some type of either cellular tower, rooftop deal, or in-building DAS in place, and that's growing. We're very, very active. I managed the business back when we first signed our deal with American Tower in 1997. Lost it for a little bit, picked it back up, lost it for a little bit, picked it back up again a couple of years ago, and was amazed at the amount of activity that we're seeing from the carriers who see the need to be in these venues where there is a high concentration of their customers. And what's interesting is that since they're all kind of competing with each other as well for customer base, we find that you know, it's interesting that we have a lot of properties that have multi-carrier DAS because we're in a situation where if the cell signal's bad, it's not just bad for one carrier, it's bad for multiple carriers. So it has a lot of uses for us. It's not something that I feel like the shopping center could be as successful as it is without it, whether that's 4G, Wi-Fi, both, whatever the case may be. We had a recent situation actually with an event that we were holding with W Magazine. It was a model event that we held at Houston Galleria, that we were in a situation where it was required that we provide some type of hotspot for them to come in to be able to do their POS transactions over. It was a one-day event. There was a press release that went out, and it was going in an area where we had no Wi-Fi on the property. And so fortunately, we have a DAS at Houston Galleria. We were able to make sure we had a hotspot in that particular area, and that's how we were able to pull off the event that had thousands of customers that came to participate in the event on mall. So we continually see it as something that is a very important business use and amenity that's ever increasing on a regular basis as it relates to what we need in the property.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. So as you look at it, Simon has multiple locations across the United States. There are multiple carriers, there are multiple things that you have to bring into play. It's interesting that you've chosen to partner with a group that can bring those elements to play, which makes sense. I'd like to kind of move it to Lisa now. And Lisa, can you explain kind of the role in managing all those different elements that the neutral host provider brings to the table?
Yeah, sure. So I work for American Tower. We have 140,000 towers in 13 countries. We have over 40,000 towers in the United States. And here in Houston, we have about 1,000 marketable assets. Those are towers, rooftops, and in-building DAS. I work on the in-building DAS team. And so, you know, as a third-party provider to an owner such as Simon, it's our job to help balance the needs of the owner and the carrier, because if we can't get both of them to agree, we don't have a DAS that has the cellular capabilities that we need. And so as we work with the carriers, there's a few things we have to keep in mind. Number one is we have to respect their outside-in approach. You know, from a cost per user perspective, a carrier is first going to look at, can they cover that from the macro tower? And if they can, then how strong is that coverage? If they can't cover from the macro tower, which we're seeing a lot from a coverage perspective based in the new LEED type of environmentals that the buildings are being built with, are not great for cellular penetration. So if that's a coverage issue, or if it's a capacity issue for places like the shopping malls at Black Friday, then we're going to work with our carrier customers to understand what are they going to try and deploy, what do they want to deploy, and not just one carrier, but what do we think over the long term of the venue the carriers are going to need to deploy. And so we find a neutral host generally is our preferred model if we think that there's going to be more than one carrier. If we look at the DAS networks that we've built here in Houston and Texas and throughout the country, we average about 2.3 carriers per network. So we truly believe in the neutral host model because we think that as you bring more carriers onto the network, shared electronics and shared passive infrastructure makes a lot of sense financially. And then as we also need to balance the needs of our owner, aesthetics is extremely important. Especially if you look at the premier retail venues such as Houston Galleria here, we just can't be putting multiple penetrations in ceilings as new carriers come on, or as carriers increase the amount of frequencies that they want to broadcast in. So neutral host really works well from an aesthetics perspective. And then from an onboarding perspective, if we have a neutral host network that has capacity, rather than having the 9 months it typically takes to go from design to onboarding of a new customer, we can speed that up to 45 days, 30 days if needed. We've done that. We actually had a carrier customer come to us last year before a convention. With less than 28 days, we went from application to on air. Had a neutral host network not been there, that would not have been possible. And so I think, for those reasons, it's really important for neutral host DAS at venues, high-end retail, such as Simon.
Okay, excellent.
So if I could just add, because that's something I should have said earlier. I will say that we partnered with American Tower for the very reason that Lisa mentioned. We don't have the internal expertise nor are we going to go out and hire. We're in the business of leasing space, right? So having a company that's their core expertise, they're already marketing across the country, they have relationships with the carriers, they're staying on top of the technology, they're providing a neutral host situation to where we don't have 3 sets of antennas on the ceiling. That's absolutely the model that not only Simon, but most of the other shopping center competitors that I see have preferred over the individual carrier deals as well.
Okay. Excellent. One of the things that Lisa mentioned was the importance of working with the carrier on an outside-in approach, making sure you're balancing the use of the macro appropriately. So, David, you've got a different experience in that you guys work to install the public safety network in the underground tunnels of Houston. So they're not a huge concern about the macro penetrating down there, but what kind of unique challenges did you guys face with that installation?
So obviously Solid's an OEM. We provided the equipment and we provided some guidance in regards to the design and what the system would require to carry the specific frequencies. It's unique in the sense that it's below ground. We're not interfering, nor do we have a potential to interfere or impact the macro public safety network as much, just because of the isolation of the antennas.
Also employs up to 1,000, direct employers, but also it represents probably between 10 to 20,000, indirect employers. So basically, the Tier 1 carrier was interested in having a solution that allows not only the visitors, but the people working at the facility. Being a museum and also a little bit of an educational facility, it represents a lot of challenges because in a museum they not allow you to move things around and work your areas very easy. So the first challenge is the first design that the carrier did for the facility end up needing more power. So that was the first challenge. So they needed to move from original 2-watt power into a 5-watt power solution. So we will help the carrier to accomplish that very easy. But also having to secure some of the areas that were restricted to installation. Also the placement of the antennas, it was part of the challenge. So in a way, it was very difficult to deploy the system and to install it to obtain the levels of performance. However, working together also, because most of the time the enterprise or the venue owner doesn't really understand RF, so they just tell you, you cannot access this area. However, at the same time, they realize that being connected, it's must have. So in that perspective, the working together, educating the venue owner definitely helps the carrier to develop a nice solution that meets and exceed their RF performance. At the same time, just moving into another facility, this is a pure enterprise venue. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the Houston area, but up north there's the Woodlands area. It's been becoming a very economic impact into the city of Houston because they have retail, they have a very nice neighborhood area, but also enterprise. They mentioned that it's actually the second what they call it, energy corridor, the Woodlands area. So this particular campus is owned by ExxonMobil. It's also with a Tier 1 carrier. And the challenge there was, because some of the, like you mentioned, Lisa, these new buildings, LEED certified, it basically provides a lot of energy efficiencies, but at the same time, because of the construction materials, it blocks the RF. So in this particular case, it was a pretty much, kind of straightforward standard solution. However, very close to the installation date, the carrier let us know, my competitor wants to join the system. So even though we didn't plan for multi-carrier, now we need to convert this into a multi-carrier solution. So we work together with both carriers and provide them with a solution. Some of the challenge there as well is the campus is actually still under construction. There's going to be many buildings, so it's a kind of an ongoing project. I think most important is understand from not only from the owner of the venue and the campus where they're going, but potential challenge along the way. Right now we have the tools to pretty much design many ways a solution for in-building coverage. Sometimes, communication is a challenge, right? They don't know exactly when a new building or a potential, parking garage, etc. So communication is critical in this type of, ongoing projects, because at the end of the day, it will impact the how much equipment you will need at the head-end location, but at the same time, it might impact the potential outcome of the solution for the venue owner as well. Okay.
So when we get into these kind of discussions, we end up being very DAS heavy because we're very DAS oriented from our history. But we know that there are a lot of different elements that are now coming in that are making up the elements of the heterogeneous network. One of the things that we hear a lot of conversation about is small cells. So Gabe, I'd like to come back to you on the idea of small cells. As far as fits, we know that they're going to be great for the urban canyon. They're a good way of dropping RF below the average building height and providing good service. How else do you see small cells kind of playing into the development of the Houston cellular coverage?
Sure. Well, small cells, everybody, definitely is jumping into the small cell, wagon, if you want to call it that way. But I think some of the challenge from the macro are actually the same challenge of the small cell. So regardless that, small cell is low power radio, small footprint, you still need the three basic, requirements. You need a location, you need power, and you need backhaul. So even though you have a smaller footprint for a small cell, you still need those three things. So if you want to put small cell, let's say in a wood pole in in the middle of the city, you still need the municipalities to give you access. You still need fiber or some backhaul, and also you need power. So even though small cells are definitely more easy to install, that doesn't mean that you can install from one day to the other. You need to go and follow the process. At the same time, I think as we move into a more dense network with macro and small cell getting closer and closer, basically the goal for the operators is to manage both the macro deployment and the small cell to provide even better user experience. So that is a challenge. That is, you start densifying more small cells into the macro. There's a lot of performance and RF optimization that needs to be done to it's just not a matter to put a small cell here and there. It also needs to be optimized. Otherwise, the user experience that you're looking to increase is not going to be there.
So, Paula, looking at the retail space, I mean, that's got to be something that's attractive to you as the Director of Field Technical Operations, because the promise of small cell is that it delivers RF at a lower cost. That's got to be attractive because it will lower your operating costs. So how do you work with your delivery provider, American Tower? How do you have those discussions? How does that work out for you guys when a new technology like this presents itself?
Well, I mean, we work with them closely as the leader in the industry as far as we're concerned as to whether it's a good fit within our particular venue. And, as it relates to small cell, it's, from Simon's perspective, we're still in our infancy stages with it. I mean, we see that it's a good fit for other venues, but maybe not necessarily the shopping center venue quite yet. There's obviously small cell inside, small cell outside. And so, we've dipped our toe in the water, but we're still kind of waiting on it to evolve to determine exactly where we're gonna go with it.
Okay. And then, Lisa, from your perspective, is that something that you're getting a big push from the carriers to incorporate into your proposals?
Yeah, so it really depends. So I think I'd say that each kind of venue stands unique, and you have to kind of evaluate from a carrier perspective, from an owner perspective, what we need to accomplish. Obviously, the promise of small cells is to further compress the cost per square foot, which is always attractive, for the folks that are, funding the build. We're finding the, spaces under 500,000 square feet tend to be good use cases where maybe the play for small cells makes more sense than neutral host, as well as other venues per se that might not have the propensity, such as retail, to be strong multi-carrier networks, things like office complexes where it's a small enterprise that might have a handset deal. Those tend to be good plays. Places, potentially hospitals where, a lot of times the hospitals are trying to keep their surgeons happy. Because if the surgeons don't have connectivity, then they are losing revenue if they can't book in a surgery in the hospital. So, we're finding those might be good applications. We've got several trials going on for those type of spaces. We're also looking for, we're in a REIT business, so we're always looking for, how do we make that readable? And for us, again, it comes back to being a neutral host. Small cells tend to be single bands right now, which leads us to believe that they're good. They're good network solution for non-neutral host solutions. As we were talking with, I think it was Erickson, who's talking about dual band small cells coming out next year. So when the small cells tend to start to become more neutral hosts, I think we'll look again to evaluate where the proper play is in venues.
Okay. And so when we talk about small cell, we talk about deploying things like this, it starts to look almost like a Wi-Fi deployment. And when we talk to the enterprise, a lot of times, when they equate wireless with Wi-Fi, they don't tend to think of it as cellular. So, David, I want to kind of bring this in your direction. Looking at that comparison between Wi-Fi and small cell, what's the argument for incorporating Wi-Fi or leaving it out in a particular kind of an installation, like a retail mall?
I think it's right. There's two things that we're serving the end user. It's one, connectivity, and two, capacity. And Wi-Fi is kind of the catch-all that can fit both of those, especially requirements, especially as it when we're looking at data. You know, there was a time where we used to go to fast food restaurants and never expect that there would be Wi-Fi in those. So to talk about the expectancy as though it's a utility, the entire ecosystem has changed. Everywhere we go, including this property, if you want Wi-Fi and you're not paying for it or you're not a guest, right, it's throttled. So what that tells us is that there's a demand there. Because if it wasn't throttled, right, the demand that's put on the networks isn't what the networks are really willing to provide in that capability. What's driving the demand is how fast is the application on the device or the device itself. So Wi-Fi does lend itself to users with limited data plans. Or if you go into a retail area or a hotel that you don't have adequate cellular coverage, Wi-Fi is kind of the catch-all. So the limitation with Wi-Fi is that it's not an open pipe. And more often than not, if carriers have coverage, especially in metropolitan markets, I know certainly the carrier that I use, I'm getting much better bandwidth here using my phone and tethering it to my computer when I was down here working just prior to the session than I was with Wi-Fi. But again, I'm using an open guest Wi-Fi that there's clearly several hundred other people that are probably accessing it, and we're all getting our fair share. So it certainly serves its purpose. It's economical. It's unlicensed. And when you have something that's unlicensed, it by nature becomes very economical because there's so many people in the business of providing that. So it drives the cost down. Whereas in the cellular world, we like to think that we're driving costs down. We like to tell the carriers that we're driving costs down, but the reality is that to deploy cellular networks is expensive. But there's a trade-off with that, and that is the quality of the voice, the data throughput with the speeds.
Okay.
I'll get to stat on the Wi-Fi front. You know, we have a lot of properties in our portfolio, in particular the Premium Outlets division that has international tourists. And so Wi-Fi is a critical, it's really a critical piece for us to deliver for international tourists that come abroad and don't want to have to pay roaming charges when they're, you know, from an international perspective. So we continue to see it a very important amenity for us to have to offer, at least to the public.
Okay. And this is an unrehearsed thing. We tried to make sure that we knew what the flow of the panel was going to go. But in David's discussion, it was interesting to me because if you look at the struggles that the higher ed space and the hospitality space have, is that the Wi-Fi that they offer has become an amenity. It has become a cost for them, and it replaces something that used to be a revenue generator. So it was the telephone lines that were in the dorm rooms. Those are gone now. For hotels, it's the long-distance phone calls. It's the pay-per-view that they no longer have the ability to sell as easily as they did before. In your space, as a property owner, are you able to monetize Wi-Fi as effectively?
We're not. No, I mean, when we first rolled it out, we had played around with the idea of making it something that was a cost, you know, a pay-to-play, and it didn't resonate that way. There was free Wi-Fi in Starbucks and free Wi-Fi in McDonald's, and so if you can go get free Wi-Fi there, why would you have to pay for it in the common area of the shopping center? And so, it's totally free in all of our properties at this point.
Okay.